every day that you see an 1894 Peugeot parked alongside a 1994 McLaren. But this is a very special occasion. We're here at Goodwood to celebrate 100 years of motorsport. And there are over 100 fantastic cars here, all doing what competition cars do best, competing. Fastest time of the day was posted by Martin Brundle in his Peugeot-powered McLaren MP49. 47.8 seconds up the narrow, cambered Goodwood hill climb meant a very brave piece of driving.
I wonder if McLaren will be around in 100 years.
By contrast, Peter Briggs, in his vis-à-vis Peugeot from Australia, was more concerned with the tricky down change needed to make it up the hill at all. The man responsible for assembling this fantastic array of cars was the host at Goodwood, Lord March.
We've got 135 cars here from all over the world, so that was quite a lot of work to find all of them, talk to the owners, persuade them to come, make them feel that this was, you know, actually going to happen and was something special.
Helping Charles March was his co-sponsor, John Surtees.
The important thing is that what you see around, you see whole families. This is the important thing, is that it's motorsport brought back to, you know, the whole generations. And you've got the little kids being introduced to the sights and sounds of these eras, which, let's face it, before my time as well.
That was also true of the car John was driving, the pre-war works Mercedes W125.
This has got power from zero, virtually. I mean, as soon as you touch the throttle, I mean, there's just an awful lot of power available. And of course, the tyres is sort of wide. And so together with that, I suppose what we're talking about is a big go-kart, you know, with about 600 and something horsepower. I mean, it is quite a fearsome beast in its own way, but I'm just sort of getting into the swing of it and telling myself all the time, brake on the right, throttle in the centre, brake on the right. So if you see me muttering as I'm going down the straight, that's what I'm telling myself.
Tim Moore may not have been going as fast, but driving his 1884 de Dion Bouton steam car also required concentration.
You've got a regulator here for the steam, a steering handle here, which you have to turn like this, and the brakes levers in the middle, and they act directly on the wheels. Your feet are on top of the engines, because it's got two engines, one engine for each wheel, and it operates a bit like a steam railway engine.
Two engines?
Yep.
Tim claimed his car holds the honour of winning the first ever motor race, but the event, held in 1887, was a bit unusual, as no one else turned up. The de Dion wasn't the only car present with two engines, but this Williams from 1982 was the only one with 6 wheels. A product of the ground effect era, the narrow twin driving wheels were designed to create bigger tunnels for more downforce, rather than more traction. It was banned from racing, but Jonathan Palmer was the Williams test driver then and has fond memories of driving it.
One of the things that I really remember about this car, driving it, is that it was great fun to throw around, to get a bit sideways, because when the car started to break away, instead of one wheel losing grip and therefore losing 50% of your rear end grip, if one wheel lost grip, you still had 3 other wheels giving you some grip, you know, over little bumps and things like that. Yeah. So it was quite progressive, and of course it's so novel, isn't it?
But novelty was quite the norm at Goodwood. This 1935 Alfa Romeo Bimotore was designed by Enzo Ferrari with 2 supercharged straight-8 engines producing over 500 horsepower between them. Bugatti only built 2 4-wheel drive Type 53s, and Louis Chiron drove one of them on the 1932 Clausen run. It was beaten then by Caracciolla's Alfa Romeo. It was beaten here by the Goodwood Gradient. The Rover BRM gas turbine car is unique and came 10th at Le Mans in 1965, but it also failed to make the top at Goodwood. More successful was the glorious 1929 4.5-litre blower Bentley driven by Jack Sears. His personal association with Goodwood started just after the war.
My very first motor race as a spectator
was in 1948, when the winner of the 500cc race was one Stirling Moss, who the commentator said was aged 18 years of age and looks promising for the future. And I told him that story here today, and he actually said, do you know, funnily enough, that was the first sort of 3 or 4 races I ever did.
That's really quite a nice little car on the hill climb, because you don't have to go too fast, you know, and it's that sort of thing. And that does bring back an awful lot, because that was my beginning, and I never knew what racing was about, so I learnt on that. And then, of course, the W196 Mercedes, which is a car that I was lucky enough to win the British Grand Prix with in '55. And that brings back many happy memories of being, of course, with one of the great teams of the world, which was Mercedes, driving with Fangio.
How is the car handling and performing compared to those days?
Well, it's handling extremely well. I mean, it's not a hill climb car, that's for sure. It was a Grand Prix car, and the races we would do were then a minimum of 3 hours or 500 kilometres. But considering what we're asking of it, I think it felt extremely good. It's difficult. I've got to remember the gearboxes back to front, things like that, because now I'm a bit older, I forget these things. But it's a lovely car.
Another of Stirling Moss's favourite cars was the Aston Martin DBR2. Gillian Goldsmith was relishing the challenge of the narrow hill in such a powerful car.
It's got a very large 4.2 engine, twin plug head. It's a terrific muscle car. It's quick at the top. It's very quick. No room for error. And on a day like this, be careful, look after the machinery, but also, between you and me, it's a competition. They say it isn't, but everybody's trying.
I hitched a ride with Stirling when he had a run in the Aston. He'd last driven it to a win in Nassau 35 years previously.
A terrific car, I must say. Aston's built really cars that were great to handle. They weren't Le Mans winners, but they were wonderful cars because you could race them on circuits like Nürburgring, which was very difficult, and the Targa Florio. And the car that we're in, which of course I haven't driven for many years, was one of the supercars. It's not a heavy car to drive. It steers well on the throttle. The brakes are light and powerful. The steering is not heavy. And it's a car that you can balance and you can feel your way with it. So it is quite a rewarding one to drive, actually. A good, what I call a good road racing car. All cars have a character, and they give you a message. And depending on your ability to understand the message is the way you finish up driving. They say, look, that's fast enough, and if you go any quicker, I'm going to damn well bite you. And if they get to that point and you don't back off and you don't hear it, then you're in trouble.
Some drivers at Goodwood didn't hear that message and got bitten. Only Mike Wilds in the Villeneuve Ferrari suffered broken bones as well as bruised pride. But the safety issue adds point to Lord March's plans for the Goodwood racing circuit.
We're obviously working hard at trying to get historic racing back at the circuit. We want to put it back really just how it was in the 50s and 60s and have a very limited programme of historic racing and really put the circuit back into that kind of Brooklands Goodwood tradition.
And every enthusiast is no doubt impatient for the day when Goodwood can offer cars like these, racing against each other as once they did, driven by the likes of Hawthorn, Collins, Brooks and Moss.